Today, during the Korean conference for Overwatch 2, all Ramattra's abilities in exact details were revealed. Now, I do not want to hold you guys hostage. If all you want is the abilities themselves and the details for you to read, they are on screen. Go ahead and pause and read, and you may leave. Even if it harms the video, I don't care. That's the info for you. However, if you want me to read it to you and have a discussion, let's get into it. First ability is called Void Accelerator, which is the Omnic form, which is the default form. Left click fires a projectile that advances in a certain shape. Projectile that advances in a certain shape. Huh. What the fuck am I supposed to get out of that? Right click, create a barrier at the target location. Now, of course, I'm not going to go ahead and lie to you. I will say that the left click is a little bit weird. Maybe, I don't know if you decide the shape, is it RNG? Maybe the shape doesn't actually matter. I don't know what they mean as in advances in a certain shape. The right click, however, create a barrier at a target location is pretty straightforward. How will that UI look? Is it auto target? Is it more like a Sigma ultimate where you kind of put it in a specific cone? That much we can't really see without visuals, but the barrier will come up and you will be able to choose its location regardless. The next ability is the E, Vortex of Gluttony. Or Gluttony? Gluttony. It looks like Gluttony. Launch nanospheres. It explodes on contact with the ground, creating a damaging force field. Enemies within the force field influence are pulled to the ground. The movement speed of enemies under the influence of the force field is slowed. So this is this ability on screen. This one makes a lot of sense to me. The sphere is how it's shaped, explodes on contact, creates the actual field itself is damaging. It pulls people to the ground, so anti-gravity, and they're slowed. I think it's pretty straightforward. The next one is the Nemesis form, which is on your shift key by default. Transforms into Nemesis for 8 seconds and uses the following skills. It is not disclosed how many seconds the form can be held, which is weird because it starts by saying 8 seconds, so I guess take that part with a grain of salt. Left click attacks with fists forward, generating a shockwave each time the fist is raised. Shockwave penetrates enemies in front of them. Holy sh, okay. Right click reduces movement speed but greatly reduces damage from the front. Okay, so you kind of become the tank. Instead of putting up a shield, ooh, you kind of become the shield. You body block. Okay. When in Nemesis form, gain 150 additional defense, increases total health from 450 to 600. So yeah, you become tankier. You have an ability that lets you tank and soak up bullets, and you get a throw punches that generate a shockwave, which I guess shoots forward, I guess at a short distance, I would assume. The final ability is the Q, Destruction Ultimate. Automatically switches to Nemesis form, creating an energy zone around it. Enemies within the energy zone take continuous damage. The duration is maintained as long as you deal damage to enemies within the energy zone. Ooh, this one needs some dissecting. Okay. So you turn into Nemesis, but you have this aura, I suppose, around you, and if anyone enters that aura, they will take damage over time. The duration is maintained as long as you deal damage to enemies within the energy zone. This one is interesting. So does the ultimate continue as long as you're dealing damage to the enemies? Does that mean if they run away, that's how they stop your ultimate? But if they keep fighting you, your ultimate continuously goes on? What? Now, obviously, this is where just having a translated version of all the abilities won't be perfect. I don't know if sticking to the enemy means you maintain your ultimate as long as possible that way. It's not completely clear. But the hero himself, from start to finish, based off of the translation or the abilities we have here, is quite interesting. Because for one, switching forms changes the playstyle insanely amount, right? Like, I mean, in Omnic form, you're firing projectiles from far, which I assume deal damage, or you can create barriers at your target location from afar and kind of play this pseudo tank that's poking around. And then all of a sudden, you switch to your Nemesis form. I don't know if it lasts 8 seconds just to do tank thing, or maybe it's an 8-second cooldown, but you switch to your Nemesis form regardless, and you start throwing punches, right? Bada bing, bada boom. I assume they're short range, high damage, and you yourself get way more tanky with an ability to body block a ton of damage. And that's not to talk at all about the actual vortex. The vortex is unique, messing with gravity, like, and how high does it go? You know what I mean? Like, if far is super high in the air and you throw this down at a choke point, is there no way for this Pharaoh to fly over? Is this Pharaoh, no matter what, going to be pushed down? Because that is a very cool type of counter, right? Same thing with Echo. That's unique. That's not something we've actually got to play with yet, and I like the idea quite a lot. On the flip side, something not as unique as the damage over time on the ultimate. So switching to Nemesis form is forced on the ultimate, and it creates that energy zone, right? That aura that's continuously doing damage over time. Now, My only problem with this is if we think of Junker Queen, someone who's a little bit underpowered right now, she dives straight into a straight line that does the damage over time, right? She's someone who applies that. However, this is implied that it's continuous damage that stays for a longer period. So does that mean enemies are punished for fighting you? Because that's not the greatest, that's not the greatest way to make game balance. But again, we're just speculating, so please don't go ahead and hate on me. I'm just remembering that forcing into Nemesis form forces you to be that 600 tank where you can reduce your movement speed and greatly reduce the damage that's coming in from in front of you. And that's something you gotta notice. The damage is reduced from in front of you, right? You're not just overall able to body block from all angles. If someone is hitting you from behind, you still take damage. It just says from the front. So it's very similar to Doomfist when he lifts his hand up, crosses his arm, and starts, tanking up the damage. It's very, very similar, really, if you think about it. It's just that you will still take some form of damage at a reduced rate. So kind of think of Doomfist X Roadhog heal, but it's only from the front, I guess, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. There's also a lot of nuance that isn't, of course, given to us. The biggest thing is how far can these abilities be deployed? Like the Vortex, you have to be close. How far can the barrier be deployed? Do things happen through walls? And I think all this really ties to balancing more than people can predict, right? Like, for example, when you pop the ultimate, we already know there's that aura. How big is that aura? That's going to make a huge difference. When we throw punches and it has that shockwave, how far? Is it like a reverse shotgun range? Is it actually on contact, like a melee? Is it on contact only? However, of course, it does say penetrating enemies, so we know it's not only on contact, but that range matters. All the nuance on each of these abilities will make the biggest difference in terms of his power level. Don't want to use any of that nuance, and we just take it at face value. He is very, very unique, right? There's not too many tanks that have this hybrid whatsoever. Sigma has that medium range with his primary fire, then he also has that shield. He floats around, stays back, and he plays that defensive playstyle very, very well. Then you have Reinhardt, which only holds the shield, has to melee, has to stay up close and personal. You got Doomfist, who literally punches people but has a lot of mobility. And this guy is kind of a Frankenstein of a lot of them, right? In the sense of Sigma, he can play back, poke, seems to have that barrier, and play around that way. But then if he switches forms, he's like a Doomfist with way less mobility. So this kind of Frankenstein of multiple tanks is unique. I'm trying to play it back in my head if there's anyone like him, and I don't think so. I think he's actually going to be completely different, and I appreciate that. That's going to be a ton of fun, and I'm personally extremely excited. Now, I think queue times are going to go through the roof when this guy drops just because he's so unique, and it's that uniqueness that really makes people hyped for new heroes. I'm excited. I hope he's not overpowered, and I hope he doesn't come out overpowered just to be nerfed and be underpowered. The balance is what's going to matter the most, but when I get more details, you guys will as well. We might have more tomorrow, so stay tuned till then. Watch the other videos because a lot of updates came out today. I'll see you in the next one.